What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. Today, I'm going to be constructing my own Dream 2023 NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Let's go ahead and just jump straight in. Let's begin with the Busch Light Clash. Now, the Busch Light Clash, once again, is going to take place on February 5th, the same weekend that is actually going to be happening in 2023, and once again will be taking place at the Los Angeles Coliseum. This event this past year was absolutely incredible, had a lot of attendance, I think about 80-90% full for the Los Angeles Coliseum, but not only that, the racing was really good, and it was a great opening race for the next-gen cars. Yes, he had some electrical issues, some engine and mechanical failures in the race, but that's something you're going to have with a new car. I think the event will be able to attract the crowd once again, and for me, that's going to open up my dream NASCAR schedule. It'll be on February the 5th. There will be one off weekend, basically, for the 1 week where they can travel back to Daytona, and that will be where the next race takes place. And the first race of the regular season is, of course, going to be the usual Daytona 500 on August 19th. You'll have the Gatorade Duels, or the Duels, basically, on Thursday. You'll have the qualifying on Wednesday, the day before that. Then on Friday, you'll have the Truck Series. Then on Saturday, you'll have the Xfinity Series, and then you'll have the Daytona 500 to kick off the season. I would not change the Daytona 500 because the Daytona 500 has opened up the season now for almost 40 to 42, 45 years. They've been doing that for a very long time, since the early 1980s, and I would keep the Daytona 500 as the opening race in the regular season. After Daytona 500 on February 26th, we're going to begin the West Coast Swing, which will be a swing of 3 races. The second race of the season is going to take place at Auto Club Speedway on February the 26th. This, of course, will be at least for 1 or 2 more years, the big 2-mile track. But eventually around 2024, which will be a year after this next season, will eventually become a short track. The plan is to make it a short track. But the last year at Auto Club Speedway, the racing was absolutely killer and was absolutely incredible and amazing. Auto Club will continue to host their day on February 26th as the second race of the Cup Series season. Right after February 26th, on March the 5th, we'll stay in the West Coast and we'll be racing at Phoenix International Raceway. But unlike many years, for the last 15-20 years, there's only going to be one day at Phoenix. And there's a good reason why I'm giving Phoenix only one day. While I think the facility's been really great and they've had great attendance, the racing itself at Phoenix has not been the best. And of course, it will be hosting a championship race in the real-life schedule. But to me, I don't think Phoenix deserves 2 dates. The track does not produce the greatest racing, and it's going to continue to go back to one date like it used to be back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Phoenix will have the spring date, though, and not the fall date. After Phoenix International Raceway, we're going to have the first major change to the schedule on March the 12th. Now, usually we end up going to Las Vegas, but I'll talk about why Vegas is not in the spring races. Instead, we're going to be moving a road course that's basically on the West Coast, and we're going to be moving it up to the end of the West Coast Swing, and we're going to be racing at Sonoma Raceway on March the 12th. The reason I asked Sonoma earlier in the year is, look, I think the racing is not only going to be a lot better in the spring, but also you look at the scenery and look at the visionary and stuff, and look how the grass is and stuff, and it just looks so much more pretty compared to basically when you have like the desert, like basically the grass is like gone pretty much in like desert temperatures. And I think it's not only going to be better for the fans out there, but I think you also are going to get better attendance. So I think Sonoma is going to take place on March 12th on my schedule. After Sonoma Raceway, we're going to basically be heading back kind of to the southeastern portion of the country, and we're going to be going to Atlanta Superspeedway on March the 19th. Atlanta Superspeedway, I will admit, I was really skeptical of the race, but I will say that the racing itself on the track was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. You got a lot of side-by-side racing, and you got a lot of really great racing, which was a really big shock considering a lot of people thought it wasn't going to be great, and I was really surprised how good the racing was. But like Las Vegas or other tracks on the schedule, this track is only going to have one date, and it's going to lose its summer date. It will keep a spring date, though, on my schedule. After Atlanta Superspeedway, we'll kind of be heading back more toward the West Coast a little bit, and we'll be heading to the Texas area, and we'll be racing at Circuit of the Americas on March the 26th. Circuit of the Americas had probably one of the best races so far of the 2022 season, and I think it was one of the best road course races so far of the 2022 season as well. Not only that, it had really solid, not fantastic attendance, but it had really solid attendance with around 60 to 65,000 people that ended up showing up to the Speedway. And I think that if it continues to be on the schedule, and I think it could end up being, I think it will produce fantastic racing, and it will be on my schedule for March 26th. After Circuit Americas, we're going to be heading back more towards the East Coast. And we're going to kind of have an East Coast swing. The first one of those being Richmond, which will take place on a day race on April the 2nd. Well, I think night racing definitely would be really, really good showing. I think the Truck Series was a really, really big telling tale that I don't think Richmond should be a night race. Yes, I do think basically that it would be better at night, but I think they would keep it as a day race for its only race of the season. That's right. It will be only one day on the 2023 calendar on my dream schedule. And the reason being is because Richmond doesn't bring great attendance in. Well, I think the racing's been okay. I think it's a little bit overhated for some of the racing that it gets. But I don't believe that Richmond deserves more than one day. Richmond will cut back down to one day going forward. After Richmond, we're going to stay on the East Coast, and we're going to be racing at Bristol Dirt on Easter on April the 9th. Basically, for the last year, we've had the race basically on Easter weekend. Now, for the first year, we didn't race on Easter weekend, but for the second year, we raced on Easter Sunday evening, and we were able to get a full race in. That's going to happen also for Bristol Dirt, and it's going to happen in the evening once again on a Sunday night. Not only did I think it put on a really good show and put on amazing racing, I think the racing generally was better this year than it was last year, but also I think that Bristol Dirt itself makes a lot more sense to happen on Easter, and it's great for the TV ratings as well. So Bristol Dirt is going to continue being on Easter weekend, and that will be on April 9th. After Bristol Dirt, we'll be staying on the East Coast, in the East Coast area, and we'll be racing at Martinsville on April 16th. That's right, we're going to be losing the Saturday date, and we're going to be going back to the traditional day, especially with after the really, really major issues that we basically had in the night race with how horrendous the night race was. I think if I was NASCAR, if I was in NASCAR position, I would make this a day race. The weather's not only going to be much better, but I also think it's going to produce much better racing as well. So, Martinsville is going to basically be moved back a week later, and it will be happening on April 16th because it will help the weather just a little bit. After Martinsville Speedway, on April the 23rd, we'll be heading down to the south, and we'll be racing at Talladega for the first of 2 times in the season. Talladega is Talladega. It's a fantastic track, produces amazing and killer racing every single year, and I think it will continue to do that over time. I think the next-gen racing, while it hasn't been good as a Gen 6 Super Speedway racing, I think the next-gen type of Super Speedway racing will be absolutely great, and Talladega will continue to basically be taking place during about the same weekend was last year. It will take place on April 23rd. After Talladega Super Speedway, we'll be heading to Dover National Speedway on April the 30th. Dover had not only a really fantastic race, I think the best racing we've seen in many years, but also Dover had the best attendance seen in over a decade. And there have been a lot of talks behind the scenes that this track may have ended up losing a date, but they're likely going to continue to keep a date. And I agree that it should continue also to keep a date on my schedule as well. Not only, like I said, did it provide some really awesome and great racing, but also Dover is a great facility and a great track as well. And from people I know, the track brings in a lot, basically has a lot of good things around it. So we're going to keep Dover on a schedule for April 30th. After Dover, we're going to be heading out to Darlington for the May 7th weekend for the Mother's Day weekend. That's right, Darlington will be taking place around Mother's Day weekend around there, and we'll continue to have, actually, this will not be the throwback race. That's right, the throwback race is going to move back to the Southern 500 weekend, and I'm going to be putting Darlington on the May 7th weekend as their traditional points-paying race for the Rebel 400 race. I think Darlington does deserve 2 dates, and it has provided really great racing, and the spring race earlier this year, in 2022, was really great. So we're going to keep Darlington as a traditional date in the early spring, and will happen on May 7th. Right after Darlington Raceway, on May 14th, we're going to be heading out to the Midwest. We're not going to be staying in the East Coast area. We're heading back out to the Midwest. There's been some rumbling rumors in the industry that basically Kansas could lose one of their dates, or Richmond could lose one of their dates as well. Well, I think in my schedule, they end up actually losing their date, and they lose their date to another Midwest track. So we keep it in the Midwest area. That track is Iowa Speedway. Yes, you heard that right. Iowa Speedway has not hosted a NASCAR day, I believe, since 2019. And the last time I raced there, Chase Briscoe won in the Xfinity Series. The big reason why we're bringing back Iowa is look what Hy-Vee did for IndyCar. Hy-Vee did big things for IndyCar in that area, and a lot of people showed up to those IndyCar races. Plus, I think the race would actually be really good as well. multi-groove racing, kind of a little bit of a bigger Richmond, if you will, and I think the track would be able to provide some really awesome and great racing. So for me, we're going to be keep putting Iowa back on the Cup Series schedule, in fact, adding it to the Cup schedule for the first time. After Iowa, we're going to be heading back to the East Coast for the All-Star Race weekend. But we're not going to be going to Texas Motor Speedway. Now, there's a lot of talk, conversation. There could be a big announcement coming when you're watching this in regards to the future of North Wilkesboro. And I think in my schedule, we would have North Wilkesboro in the NASCAR All-Star Race. That's right. I'd be adding North Wilkesboro back on the Cup schedule for the first time in 1996, since 1996. But it's going to be the All-Star Race. And the reason I have North Wilkesboro as the All-Star Race is because look at the crowds that they got for the racetrack revival races, especially ones where Dale Jr. showed up, some of the Cup guys showed up. It provided some really great racing as well, and the attendance was great. The reason I can't have it as a points-paying race yet, I would love for it to be a points-paying track, but the reason I don't have it as a points-paying race is because they've probably had some attendance problems getting everybody in there, and traffic would be a big concern, but I think they could definitely update the infrastructure. So, for me, I would have North Wilkesboro as the All-Star Race on May 21st. And by the way, they're not going to be adding the sealer, it sounds like, so they're not going to be adding basically the dirt on the track, so that's a big positive right there. Right after the All-Star Race in North Wilkesboro, on my schedule, we're going to continue the tradition and have the Coco 600 on May 28th at Charlotte. This has been a tradition basically since the beginning. Basically back in 1960, this has been a tradition, and there's going to be no changes here when it comes to that. The Coco 600 has been a great tradition. We could see on my schedule maybe someone try the Indy NASCAR double, but that's something, because I would have the Indy 500, if I had a schedule, would have the Indy 500 a little bit earlier in the day so that basically people can go and race the Indy 500 and come back for the Coke 600. I think that'd be awesome, and the Coke 600 will continue to be on May 28th in that weekend. Right after Coco 600, we're going to be heading back more to the West Coast into the gateway to the west, and we're going to be racing at Worldwide Technology Raceway. But unlike this past year, where we raced in the day, we're going to be racing on a Saturday night at 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern. By the way, I did not mention times because times can absolutely change. But Worldwide Technology Raceway is going to be hosting their race on June the 3rd. Now, why do I have it as a late or night race? The reason being, I live in the St. Louis area, and the weather can be hit or miss. You can get really hot days and sometimes cooler days. And luckily this year, when I went to the race, the racing was a little bit cooler. That being said, I think that when it comes to Worldwide Technology, I think it should be a night race. And the IndyCars put on a much better show at night than they did at day. And I think the racing generally, like I said, would be much better as a night race than a day race. So to me, I would put Worldwide Technology Raceway as a night race for the Cup Series, and maybe bring IndyCar earlier in the year. That could be a possibility. But Worldwide Technology Raceway absolutely needs to have their races in the daytime, nighttime, in my opinion. Right after Worldwide Technology Raceway, we're going to be heading out to a new track on the schedule, the host of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and we're going to be racing at Portland Raceway on June the 11th. That's right. I am adding Portland Raceway to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. The reason being is, while yes, I think it's going to cost a lot of money for the teams, a lot in travel, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in travel to get out to there. Portland Raceway is an area that NASCAR has been wanting to get out to, is the Pacific Northwest. And I know that there's a lot of chance that rain could be a factor and the weather could absolutely be a factor. So you would think maybe they could have the race in a later portion. However, I think Portland would put on a much, much better show, and a much better show than even Sonoma would, and I think it would put on a really good show. So NASCAR, I think, in my opinion, would add Portland to the schedule on July 11th. Right after Portland, we're going to have a 1-week break. Basically, NASCAR's only off week in the regular season, and then we will be returning to Nashville Superspeedway on June the 25th. Nashville has a multi-year contract with NASCAR, the track, I believe, through 2024, so it basically will be the third year of NASCAR's contract. When I think of Nashville Superspeedway, I think the track actually had a really good race this past time around. But I will say one of the issues was the issues with the attendance. So to me, we would have to find a way to get better attendance. I think the weather starting to race a little bit maybe later, maybe making it a Sunday night race, I think would make a lot more sense, especially with the weather that it could be. We could end up getting a heat wave like we did this past year. So to me, we would add Nashville as a Sunday night race on June the 25th. Right after Nashville Superspeedway, we're going to be heading to the Chicago Street Course on July 2nd for the 4th of July weekend. This track is under a 3 to 4 year contract. Now, personally, I would, if I had no choice, I would basically take it off. But we need to have a track, a street course. NASCAR really wants a street course on the schedule, and I've got no problem with the street course being on the schedule. Plus, I don't think, well, I will say this. I don't think the racing is going to be fantastic, but I will say that I think you got to bring that attendance in. You're probably getting a lot of people, though. There's a lot of talk that they're going to be capping how many people are going to be in the race, which is kind of unfortunate. But I think with Chicago Street Course being added, with Julie Geist managing it, I think she'll do a really good job managing the track, and I think it will benefit the track in general. Right after Chicago Street Course on July 2nd, on July 9th, we're going to be going back to another racetrack that used to be on the NASCAR Xfinity Series schedule, but has not hosted a NASCAR Xfinity Series race in 10 years. The last time was 2012. But that's going to change in 2023. And for me, we would add Circuit Gilles Villeneuve to basically replace the Atlanta weekend. I have been craving for Montreal to get back on NASCAR schedules, whether it's the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, or Truck Series. This track every year from 2007 to 2012 in the Xfinity Series never disappointed. It always delivered great racing, a lot of action, a lot of controversy, you name it. That's what you need for a racetrack. And to me, I would add the track to the schedule, and I think it would put on a really fantastic show, considering you got a lot of tight corners, you got a lot of corners where you could use, and you could really pass, and I think it would be a fantastic show. So we'd be adding Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for July 9th weekend. Right after Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal, we'll be heading to New Hampshire Motor Speedway for the July 16th weekend. This past year's New Hampshire race was amazing, and the track, I think, deserves to be on the schedule, but only one date like it's been the last few years, because you get really good attendance there usually when you have one day. It did lack a little bit in attendance this past year, but I think that NASCAR could find a way to basically go ahead and fix that. So New Hampshire will continue to basically be on the schedule, and it will be happening basically around the July 16th weekend. Right after New Hampshire, we're going to be heading to Pocono Raceway on July the 23rd. Pocono had a pretty solid race. I know people look at my rankings on Twitter and they basically say, oh, you're basically ranking Pocono bad. That doesn't mean Pocono was a bad race. In fact, I thought Pocono put on a much better show than I thought it was going to be. And I think Pocono having one day makes a lot of sense. It's going to bring a lot more attendance in. They had their best crowd in many, many years. And I think it will put on a very solid show as well as a racetrack. So to me, we're going to keep Pocono as one date, and it will take place around the same weekend. Right after Pocono International Raceway, we'll be racing Indianapolis Motor Speedway on July the 30th. But instead of racing on the Indy Road Course, we'll be racing on the regular traditional Brickyard. Now, I know in the regular schedules coming out for next year, they're going to be planning to race on the Indianapolis Road Course. But with some additions of the road course on my schedule, we're going to be bringing Indy back to the regular Brickyard. And the reason being is I'm very intrigued to see how the cars would actually race on the traditional Brickyard. Do not get me wrong. I think the race on Indy Road Course was solid. I know a lot of people hated the end, but I thought the racing was actually solid when we saw it at the Indy Road Course. I thought the officiating, though, could have been a lot better. But I think we need to try to see how the regular Brickyard works. And if it doesn't work, we can go back to going back to the Indy Road Course. But if the Brickyard ends up working, why not try it? Or you can do alterations. You can have the Indy Road Course one year, the Brickyard another year. That's one thing, that option they could go with. And to me, it would probably make a lot of sense to do an alteration. But I think you also need to think about the attendance and basically the TV ratings as well. I think you'll get better TV ratings if you bring the traditional Brickyard back. Right after Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we're going to be heading to Michigan International Speedway on the August the 6th weekend. Michigan will happen basically around the same time it does in the regular schedule, and Michigan, I thought, put on a really awesome and a really good job with show, in my opinion, and probably the best race we've seen since the repaved happened, probably the best race since 2011. I think Michigan is a really awesome and it's not an awesome track, but it's a track that has really improved. If I had to do a ranking system at every track, I think it's one of the better tracks right now currently at the moment. So I think it will continue. I think it will be on the schedule, and I think it will take place on August 6th on my schedule. Right after Michigan, we're going to be heading back to a former track that actually won't be on the regular schedule in 2023, but will be on my schedule. We're going to be returning to Road America on the August the 13th weekend, which will replace one of the Richmond races. The reason I'm adding Road America is I feel like that basically Road America got screwed. Track produced not the greatest racing in the world, but the track had amazing and fantastic attendance. And I think it absolutely deserves to be on the Cup schedule. The fact that it's not on this Cup schedule is an absolute disgrace in my opinion, and it's ridiculous for a track that brought so much attendance. For it to be off the schedule is so irritating and so frustrating. So we're going to stay up in that area, and we're going to bring Road America back on the schedule like it should be on the Cup schedule. It should be personally on the Cup schedule. Right after Road America, we're going to be heading back down to the East Coast, and we'll be racing in New York at Watkins Glen on the August the 20th weekend. Watkins Glen, awesome track, produced a fantastic race, and Watkins Glen is one of my personal favorite road courses. In fact, I think it is my personal favorite road course in NASCAR currently at the moment. I think it was one of the better road course races we've seen so far in the 2022 calendar, and it personally deserves to be on the schedule long term. There should be no changes here. Watkins Glen should be the second to last race of the regular season because it could provide a lot of craziness, and it'll probably get better with the next gen as well. Provide even better racing than we saw, and trust me, the racing we saw was great. And the final race of the regular season is going to continue basically being on traditional Daytona weekend, the last race of the regular season on August the 26th. Now, a lot of you are wondering, why can't we bring the track back July the 4th? The reason being is they don't want it. They want to have that soccer games, so they're not going to be bringing it back. So we have to deal with what we got, and Daytona will take place on a Saturday night once again on August the 26th. I think it'd be better. I think it makes more sense to have it here again. Well, it should make more sense if it go on July the 4th weekend, but I digress. Anyway, I think Daytona provides a really good race. I know it shouldn't be one race to decide if you get in the playoffs or not, because you get someone who's really struggled all year and get in the playoffs like Austin Dillon did. But still, it makes more sense in some ways, and it brings a lot more excitement than it has in many, many years. So to me, Daytona will continue to be the final race of the regular season. And now we're going to jump on to the playoff races. Let's kick off with the playoffs. So let's begin with the round of 16. There will be no changes in the round of 16. First, the Southern 500 will take place on a traditional September 3rd weekend, and it will be back to being the throwback race. I think the Southern 500 being the throwback weekend makes so much more sense. I understand why they moved it away from the Southern 500 and moved it back to the first Darlington weekend, but I think the throwback race should absolutely be the Southern 500 weekend. Not only can you bring some of the legends back in there, but I think it would make more sense if you basically had the legends. You had really cool moments, don't get me wrong, in the Fox broadcast earlier this year, but I think the Southern 500 should absolutely be the throwback weekend. So that will be, though, the kickoff of the round of 16. After that, we're going to be going to Kansas for the first time on September the 10th. That's right, Kansas, like I mentioned earlier, loses one of their dates. Kansas is a really awesome track, but struggled with attendance. And there's been rumblings and rumors that it would potentially could end up losing a date in 2023. So for me, we're going to go ahead and do that and drop Kansas down to one date, and that will take place on September the 10th. And then basically September 10th, September 11th. And then finally, the Bristol night race. This is going to end up taking place as the final race of the round of 16 on September 16th. Bristol's been the night cutoff race for the last 2 years. Nothing's going to change here. It will continue to be in the cutoff race. Bristol's a great track. We haven't seen the next-gen cars race, so I think the reactions will actually produce a much better show. I think it will be one of the better short-track races for sure, and Bristol will basically be the final race of the round of 16. And now we get into the round of 12, and there is a big change that's going to be coming on the schedule here. So, if you notice, I don't have Texas on the schedule, and for me, I know there's been a lot of rumors and rumblings about the future of Texas Motor Speedway. I'm taking Texas completely off the schedule and replacing it with Chicagoland Speedway for September 24th weekend. Now, I know that Julie Geis and her team have said that they're probably not going to do it on, in the regular schedule. But for me, Chicagoland would be really awesome for the next-gen cars. I've been advocating for Chicagoland to come back for a very, very long time. And I think it will provide a really good show in the next-gen era as a whole. So I think 100% Chicagoland should come back to the schedule, and it should, in my opinion, would be in the playoffs on September 24th in a day race. I know the weather probably wouldn't be fantastic, but I think it makes sense for it to be back in the season. After Chicagoland, we're going to be heading to Talladega Superspeedway for the middle race of the playoffs on October the 1st. No changes here. Talladega has been in the playoffs basically around the middle portion of the round of 12, basically since around 2018, 2019, and nothing's going to change here. The track fights awesome racing, like I said earlier, and it will continue to be on the October 1st weekend. Talladega continues right there. And then finally, the Charlotte Roval, final race at around 12, October 8th. Charlotte Roval continues to be on the schedule. Now, there's a lot of questions about the long-term future of the Roval, considering the TV ratings have been kind of a little bit dead, have really, really struggled. But I think the racing itself really, really makes up for it. So I will continue to have the Roval as a cutoff race for the round of 12 on the October to 8th weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and get into the round of 8. And there's a couple changes on this schedule as well. Let's begin with Las Vegas. If you already noticed, like I mentioned earlier, Las Vegas is losing their spring date, and they are going to keep their fall date on October the 15th. I know on the regular schedule they have the agreement with the track, but they're not going to keep their agreement. I know this agreement goes to 2030, but we're not keeping agreement on my schedule. The track provides great racing, don't get me wrong, but I think it'd be better for attendance, and you could have the EDC Festival, maybe in a sense, kind of be around that same time weekend and same time as well. So for me, Las Vegas, October 15th, that will kick off the round of 8. Right after that, there's going to be a really major change to the schedule, and we're not going to be going to a, like Homestead there in that portion. We're going to stay on the East Coast, and we're going to end the season kind of on the East Coast, the southeast coast of the area. And we're going to be going back to a former Cup Series track called Rockingham Speedway on October the 22nd. Rockingham Speedway has not hosted a Cup race since 2004, has not hosted a NASCAR race since 2013 for the Truck Series. Track deserves to come back. I know there's been issues with the Hoosier tires at the track, but I think that's one thing NASCAR could generally resolve, and I think more short tracks on the schedule, and I think the attendance would be great. The people do need to show up, and with a little more variety and more areas to go to, I think Rockingham would make a ton of sense to be on that weekend. Rockingham will come back on my schedule. And then the final race of the round of 8 to decide who gets into Championship 4 is going to take place, no shocker here, at Martinsville Speedway on October the 29th. Martinsville has always been a great track for the cutoff race. The 2 years you've had the cutoff race for the basically getting the championship have been outstanding and stellar and killer, and the racing has just been phenomenal. So we're going to keep the tradition going and keep Martinsville as a cutoff race to end the playoffs. The race, like I said, has been good, really good, and I think it needs to continue being the cutoff race to decide who gets into Championship 4. And then finally, the championship race. We've had Phoenix the last few years. But for me, I would basically get rid of one of the Phoenix days, keep the spring day because of the racing. So where are we going for the championship race? As seen on the screen, Homestead Miami Speedway returns as a championship race on November the 5th on my schedule. The reason I got it as a championship race is because Homestead Miami Speedway is an awesome track, provides fantastic and great racing, and I think the next-gen era cars will do an amazing job, especially since it's going to be coming up here in a few weeks on the regular schedule in the middle of October. I think the second race of the round of 8. It will be a track that I think will provide not only some fantastic racing, but great racing as well. And the track deserves to be the championship race because not only will you get the championship for battling it out, but you have everyone else battling out for as well. It will be a much better show than a track like Phoenix. So anyway, that is basically all of the 2022 My Dream NASCAR schedule. So what are the big changes? Well, Richmond loses a date. Atlanta loses a date. Texas ain't even on the schedule for this year. And Kansas loses a date as well. I think a couple other tracks end up losing a date. And you get additions of North Wilkesboro for the All-Star race. Portland, you get Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Road America stays basically back on the schedule. And Rockingham makes his glorious return as well. I want a track that has more tracks on the schedule. I think it makes more sense. You get more diversity on the official schedule. So, that is going to be my Dream 2023 NASCAR schedule video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below over that. Comment your thoughts on today's video. What is your Dream 2023 NASCAR Cup Series schedules? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we should have a NASCAR News recap video. As I mentioned in today's video, there's a big announcement that's coming out in North Wilkesboro in the coming days and hours. And there's probably other stuff to cover. We might have a Truck Series race view on the channel, but I'm not confirming or denying that. We're just going to have to wait and see. And then there might be other content that's on the way as well for you guys to watch. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.